My name is Dr. Meghan Tinsley, and I'm Presidential Fellow in Ethnicity and Inequalities based in the Sociology Department at the University of Manchester. And I'm co-leading on a work package called The Changing Shape of Cultural Activism with Code. So the title of the work package is The Changing Shape of Cultural Activism, and there are two threads to the project. The first is a comparative study of 15 statues in 5 countries. And that's a research project that's led by Gary Young, Ruth Ramsden-Carlsey, Chloe Peacock, and myself. And what we're going to do is look at statues that have been contested in a number of ways, whether they've been toppled or spray painted or beheaded, or whether they're the subject of a government review. So we're interested in the process by which this happens and how people make sense of statues along the way. That's one thread of the project. The other thread is pedagogical. It's a series of workshops led by Sadia Habib with 25 young people from around the country, and they're going to be invited to engage with statues in their own local area. So they'll ask who's commemorated and who isn't commemorated, how did these statues come to be there, and how does this change the way that they engage with public space. It'll be very collaborative and creative, so the young people will also be producing poetry and zines and just invited to engage actively with sites that they might not have thought about in their local area. So the reason that we've taken this approach is, first of all, that the present movement didn't begin in the UK. It began in South Africa in 2015 with the student-led Rhodes Must Fall movement. And everything that's happened since then has been really global and transnational in character. So we know that the latest wave of contesting statues was sparked by the police killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor in the US and the global Black Lives Matter movement. So we'd like to understand the contestation of each statue within this global light and to acknowledge that every statue is unique in some way. Many of these statues, such as Colston and Bristol, have been the subject of years of contestation by activists, by members of local government, by various institutions. So we really need to place each one in their context. So we'd like to draw lessons from these processes. It's very common to hear the refrain that activists have gone about this the wrong way. They've toppled statues in the wrong way. But much less frequently do we hear what the right way is. So we're curious about how activists engage with cultural institutions or universities or local government, what has worked in the past, what hasn't worked. Are there lessons that can be drawn for activists who want to contest particular statues in their area? So we're curious about how this might be framed in the future, and how we can learn from cases in other cities and countries. Certainly, we don't expect to present a universal roadmap for how to challenge statues, but we are interested in highlighting the lessons from multiple case studies. And in the process of doing that, we want to highlight why activists might choose to contest statues, so that people who might not be sympathetic to that process might begin to understand why statues matter in the first place, and why they might need to look more closely at statues that they've taken for granted in public spaces. What I find exciting and innovative about Code's approach is that it allows us to speak across institutions and across racial and ethnic inequalities, rather than just looking at one episode or one phenomenon in isolation. So, for example, if we're talking about the contestation of statues, it's really impossible to understand that in all of its complexity without historicizing it and looking at Rhodes Must Fall, which was a movement not just about contesting statues, but about decolonizing the curriculum, which is another one of our work packages. Similarly, we can't really understand the global surge in movements to topple statues without looking at the Black Lives Matter movement and its origins in the US in opposition to police violence. So those are just two of the other work packages that we can speak to. Cultural institutions, similarly, many of these statues end up in museums, but what happens next and who decides? So it's really to get a full sense of the scope of racial and ethnic inequalities as well as anti-racist movements. It's important to look across institutions. And that's what this new code project enables us to do. There are a lot of opportunities to have an impact and to have an impact on policy specifically at this moment. So for example, the London Mayor has convened a commission on diversity in the public realm, which is going to ask big questions about how to represent the city's diversity in city squares and with place names. And closer to home, Manchester City Council has launched a review called History, Stories and Voices in the Public Realm, and our own Gary Young is participating in that review. So those are just two examples, but there's clearly a lot of interest from policymakers in the movement led by the public to contest statues, and there are a lot of opportunities for us to have a voice in that process, as well as to get attention from the larger public and the media.